This is Fact Finder from the BBC.
Coming up on today's show, internet censorship on the rise in Africa. We go to Ethiopia to find out the impact of the recent disruptions. And in Sudan, did the internet shutdown slow down the momentum of the protests? Ugandan musician Geoffrey Kigozi tells us how he fought to protect his reputation over false accusations. And it's the future of job interviews. More and more big companies are using artificial intelligence for recruitment.
Hello, I'm Shiro Marioki.
And I'm Ian Wafula. Welcome to Fact Finder from the BBC, in which we question the reality behind the headlines and look at the stories being talked about across Africa and how they affect you.
First up, internet access in Ethiopia has been restored after 10 days of a nationwide disruption for the second time in 1 month. Ethiopian authorities have not revealed the reason for the recent shutdown, even as anxiety grows across the continent over internet censorship by governments as a way of dealing with dissenting voices. Richard Kagoe reports.
Barely a week or a month goes by these days without hearing of an internet shutdown taking place in an African state. Ethiopia was hit by a nationwide internet disruption twice in the month of June, leaving millions of users without access to information and online services. The first outage was reported on the 11th of June in what news reports indicated was aimed at preventing students from cheating in national examinations, but was restored on the 18th of June before there was another shutdown after the 22nd failed coup in Amhara state. What's the cost of the internet shutdowns? We caught up with Tibaba Gedamu, a publisher based in the capital, Addis Ababa.
We communicate with our clients, especially from the regions, via internet. They send us the requirements, we design them, and then we send it back for them for confirmation. And then they'll confirm it, and then we'll do it. Now they have to come in person, like they have to come like all over from the other regions to Addis just to get the design, to confirm, and then to send it back.
The uncertainty lingers on as no one knows when they will encounter the next internet cut.
So we don't know, simply, we just don't know. When this happens, it just happens.
There has been no explanation on what caused the disruption, but the state-owned internet service provider Ethio Telecom, in a statement, apologized for the outage but gave no information. Well, it all started in July 2016 when the internet access was cut during the national exams. There was a nationwide shutdown a month later after a protest was called by activists. Later, in October 2016, there was another outage after declaration of national emergency after hundreds were killed in anti-government protests. The internet was shut down the following year in May 2017, and June 2018 to curb the leaking of exam papers. There was also disruption in November 2018 amid popular anti-government protests. Internet shutdowns have become popular with African governments. In June 2019 alone, Sudan began experiencing an almost complete internet blackout after protesters staged a mass sit-in in Khartoum on 3rd June. Across the continent in West Africa, Liberia blocked the internet to check anti-government protests in the capital Monrovia. Mauritanian authorities also disrupted connectivity following contested elections on the 22nd of June. The global digital rights group Access Now reports that there were 21 shutdowns across Africa in 2018, up from 13 in 2017. Richard Kagoe, BBC.
Next, in Sudan, the ruling military council switched off the internet in response to protests which took place early last month. Let's take a look at how the switch-off affected the protesters' ability to organize and the impact on the economy. Here's BBC's Tommy Oladipo with more.
Sudanese protesters gathered in these streets a few weeks ago. The government sent out its security forces who used deadly force to crush the protests. And the internet was also shut down. And that leads us to the question, because these people mobilize themselves on social media, is it possible for a revolution to succeed here today without the internet?
As you see, last message was received June the 3rd, and we were able to contact our friends outside the country. Actually, that used to make us feel safe. The absence of social media is affecting our work very much. Now that we have to organize for protests and other activities through phone calls and SMS, it is very slow. The number of people we get to reach is very low comparing to people with social media, and it's expensive. If the social media wasn't turned off June the 3rd, we would have been able to gather a 1 million-person protest. I'm 100% sure.
The impact of the internet shutdown goes far beyond the demonstrators. There are some people here whose livelihoods depend directly on the internet.
Al-Rashid drives a Terhal, which is a local taxi hailing app.
I sold my previous business to buy this car, but since the internet has been down, I'm not even making 20% of what I used to. It's difficult to meet any of my family's basic needs.
It's not just people like Al-Rashid who are suffering. Sudan's economy as a whole is estimated to be losing hundreds of millions of dollars because of the lack of internet. It's important to remember that when the protests first kicked off back in December, people took to the streets because of the economic hardship.
We're now joined by Alp Toker, the Executive Director of NetBlocks, a non-profit organization that monitors internet censorship. Thank you for joining us, Alp. Now, let's start from the beginning. What's the connection between the internet shutdown and state security?
Well, there are many reasons why governments switch off the internet, but increasingly we see that authorities are switching off the internet on grounds of security. So the idea is that switching off an entire country, cutting off lines of communication will actually somehow add to security, perhaps, say, following during a crisis or an attack. And there are a few viewpoints on this, but generally this has been cast into doubt because it's such an extreme measure.
So does shutting down of the internet infringe of human rights, for instance, such as the right to information and freedom of expression?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you look at what this means, we're talking about switching off an entire nation, tens of millions of people in one go. It's very indiscriminate. It restricts freedom of expression. It restricts freedom of assembly and association, very fundamental human rights. It also impacts economic rights, like your right to prosperity and a right to self-determination. So there are many issues with this kind of policy, and yet governments still seem to do it.
What is the true economic cost of an internet shutdown?
So internet shutdowns cost a lot. We're talking about switching off entire businesses across a country. If you look at the shutdown in Ethiopia a few weeks ago, then you're looking at $4.5 million a day lost to economy, plus a loss in investor confidence, a loss in consumer confidence, which can really knock out an economy in the long term.
So finally, why is the trend of shutting down the internet on the rise in Africa, in your opinion?
Well, if you look at what a shutdown is, it means that first, the public can't speak to the outside world. So it's quite a sly tactic. It means that you're able to silence a population without actually having the world know, which is why it's really important to keep track of these and monitor these incidents from the outside. But it just seems like the perfect form of control, because you're able to switch off public protest, you're able to switch off public dissent at will. And this is why we need more policy and more work to actually counter these shutdowns.
All right, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, the term stowaway came into public conversation recently when a body fell out of a Kenya Airways plane to London.
So, who is a stowaway and what are some of the recent cases? Fatia Mohammed Noor is at our touch screen.
Thank you, guys. Well, a stowaway is a person who hides aboard a vehicle, ship or aircraft in order to gain free passage. According to recent records from the UK Civil Aviation Authority, between January 2004 In March 2015, 6 stowaways were found on aircrafts within UK airports. So what are some of the cases in the recent years? In September 2012, Jose Matada died after falling from the undercarriage of a flight from Angola to Heathrow. This case was followed by a documentary by BBC's Rob Walker, and he explains how a stowaway makes his way to the plane. Take a look.
Climb up as quickly as possible along this bit of metal and then into the wheel arch. He would have done this at night, so it would have been pretty dark. And I can't help wondering whether by this point he would have had second thoughts and realised that he'd made a terrible mistake. Now, the first major risk to stowaways comes after takeoff, because at that point the wheels retract up and fill most of this space. As the plane climbed, the temperature in here would have fallen to -60, the oxygen would have thinned, and then at some point over the next 8 hours or so, Jose would have lost consciousness.
Another case was in June 2015. One man was found dead on an office rooftop in Virginia in the United States. Another survived but was in critical condition. They both clung onto a British Airways flight from Johannesburg, South Africa. Now, aviation experts say that chances of survival are almost zero. However, there have been reports of a number of stowaway survivors reported in previous years. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Fatia. Still to come on Fact Finder. Nigerian police grants BBC access to its special unit fighting a new wave of kidnappings in the oil-rich nation. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Fact Finder from the BBC.
Now, Nigeria is in the grip of a kidnapping epidemic. Thousands of Nigerians have fallen victim and millions of dollars in ransom have been paid. But the intelligence response team, led by a man nicknamed Nigeria's Super Cop, are taking the fight to the kidnappers.
Now, is the unit the solution to Nigeria's kidnap crisis? BBC Africa's Kunle Falai has been given exclusive access to the unit.
Nigeria is in the grip of a kidnapping epidemic. Thousands of Nigerians have fallen victim and millions of dollars in ransoms have been paid. A decade ago, oil workers were their main targets, but now anyone can be a victim. Paul and Spencer were kidnapped while driving along a major expressway.
And we came out of the car and they asked us to lie on the floor. And of course, at that moment, I felt that was the end for me because I had never seen a gun to my face like that, not so close.
The men were beaten and tortured.
The first night they told us that there's a shrine they have, that when they want to kill you, they take you there and kill you.
The pair were only released after the payment of a large ransom. Now their hopes for justice hinge on the actions of the Intelligence Response Team, or IRT, a Nigerian police unit dedicated to combating kidnapping and armed robberies. Using intelligence and old-fashioned detective work, the unit has tracked down some of Nigeria's most notorious kidnappers.
Hello, Commander.
The IRT is led by Deputy Police Commissioner Abba Kyari, known by many as Nigeria's super cop.
You just don't go blindly and arrest somebody, take payment. It's very important to send the message to the criminals that Kyari and his people will follow you wherever you are, and they will never forget.
One of the IRT's biggest achievements has been the capture of these alleged Boko Haram terror group members, some of whom are accused of kidnapping 276 schoolgirls from the town of Chibok in 2014. But questions have been raised about their methods. The Network on Police Reform in Nigeria say they have received complaints about police brutality by IRT teams.
Many Nigerians are not aware, or even if they are aware, they are willing to overlook the excesses, the way IRT treats criminal suspects while in their custody, and which for us is an issue of major concern.
The IRT says all complaints are investigated and disciplinary action is taken if necessary. The threat of kidnapping has now become a fact of life for most Nigerians. It may take generations to address the issues that have turned some young people into violent kidnappers. But for now, what Nigerians desperately need is a police force that can bring the rule of law back to the country.
Now let's get some perspective on the kidnap crisis from BBC's Kunle Falai, who now joins us from Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you, Kunle, for your time. First of all, how are you able to get the exclusive access to cover the police operations?
It became an argument about whether to give an international news crew access to the police when a lot of people have accused them of police brutality. And it was tough at first because the time that we spent convincing them to give us access was as much the time that we spent filming.
And Kunle, objectivity is a key element in journalism. How do you say you are able to maintain this?
For a lot of Nigerians, they see this unit, the Intelligence Response Team, as heroes. And there are also some people who also see them as people who are guilty of serious police brutality. In fact, there have been accusations of police brutality by some human rights activists against the IRT. And so we needed to balance those angles to ensure that we do not lose sight of any of that, because we do not also want to be accused of being just mouthpiece of the Nigeria police, because we're aware of documented human rights abuses against them. And that was something that we needed to reflect in the documentary.
And other than the international media which you represent in this case, how would you say that the local media is covering cases of kidnapping in Nigeria?
This is the first time that whether an international organization or a local media, this is the first time an organization has been able to have this sort of access into the operation of the IRT or any unit of the Nigeria police for that matter. And for a lot of Nigerian media, the challenge is about access. They don't have the access, and usually what they put out there is just what they are told by the Nigeria police.
Okay, Kunle, thank you very much for making time for us.
Over to Uganda now, where musician Geoffrey William Kigozi, or GeoSteady, knows all too well the power of fake news and the toll it can take, especially as a public figure. He was the victim of a cruel lie that took a decidedly personal turn. What is it like to have your reputation put at risk? He tells us his story.
I felt like no one would understand me. When even my own people I called my friends, started posting it, saying, how can GeoSteady even do something like that? My name is George William Chigozi, aka GeoSteady. On 10th May, I was home and my wife was in the car, so as she was changing different stations, she landed on one and heading came up like GeoSteady child neglect. And she was like, hey babe, come and see this. Sounded so funny to us, because we know our journeys. A girl came up and she was saying she had my kid. I looked at this situation and I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know the kid, I didn't know the girl. It became so viral. Even the reactions of my fans, I saw 95% negativity on my posts. And that was very serious. I even started fearing to go and perform. And even remember on Mother's Day, I was saying Happy Mother's Day to every woman in the world. And everyone was saying, share. How can you even post something like that? Do you even wish women good? How can you even deny your own kid? So I just went to police, got a statement, because I didn't know anything about this, and it was gonna go, it was already spoiling my name. And they were telling the girl, is this the guy you're saying, is this the owner of the kid? And the girl was saying, yes, he's the one. I got off my shades like, am I the one? And she was saying, yes, it is you just said it. And the other one was saying, yes, it is you just said, I know you. So the police said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to carry out a DNA test. Nothing was matching. I was supposed to do a Mother's Day performance at Wooma Grounds. I told my booking agent, please call that lady, because she has not called us all day. And the show is today. When they called her, she said, the thing is already cancelled. I knew she was right. And I felt like the media, they're not employing professionals. Because if it was a professional person, would have called first, would have consulted Joe, is this right?
Now, believe it or not, artificial intelligence is likely to play a role in our future job interviews. Research in the UK by the BBC shows that video interviews and screening is on the rise and is used by many employers in their recruitment. Take a look.
There are lots of things that appeal to me about this role. I'm excited about meeting new people.
It'll actually video you doing the interview, so companies can actually see you pre-recorded, so you won't actually be speaking to anyone.
The world of work and the kind of studying that I've
Gives them an opportunity to see you and how you are in real life, in person.
Workplace environments.
So that means 1 minute and 30.
Students here at Liverpool Uni are able to practice on software now used by lots of big firms.
And honestly, it really adds to the pressure.
The tech behind these video answers can do more than you might imagine.
They'll look at facial movement, they'll listen to the tone of your voice, and they believe that they can really accurately predict now certain character traits just through using the AI technology on your video interview. Things like your level of conscientiousness, your level of enthusiasm, how much you smile, but also whether you're an introvert or an extrovert character as well. So that wealth of information is going to be really helpful for employers.
Am I looking in the right place, do you think, there?
Yeah, definitely. I think you have the right angle, but if anything, it'll be a white background as well.
So that's important, thinking about what's behind you.
What's behind you.
At the moment, it tends to be bigger companies who are using video interviews and artificial intelligence.
For certain types of roles, we work with a number of clients, say within the retail sector, where they're doing high volumes of recruitment and they're looking for ways of saving time and also being able to really clear sort of vast numbers of applicants through to people that they're really serious about.
I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Those representing the recruitment industry say these issues need to be considered before making a selection.
We've got some older workers perhaps who might not be as savvy with the technology that we're using. So I think we need to be quite mindful to be as inclusive and as fair as possible to encourage a wider talent pool to apply.
Perfect. How do you feel about that?
Whether it's a useful tool, a time saver, or another hurdle in a difficult jobs market, as technology improves, recorded video interviews will become more common.
Now, some stories seem so incredible, they just can't be true. Or can they?
It's time now for True or False from Harare in Zimbabwe.
First up, man turns his xenophobic attackers into snakes.
It's true. Nah, false.
This is false. A search by Africa Check found that in fact the photo and video are of a man in Zimbabwe, not a Malawian migrant in South Africa, and so there is no evidence of xenophobic attackers being turned into snakes. Next, doctors removed 13 kgs of feces from 22-year-old man who was constipated since birth due to rare bowel movements.
False.
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 False. That's not possible. False.
Well, believe it or not, this is actually true.
Come on, guys. Wait. That's impossible, yeah.
Doctors removed 28 pounds of feces from the bowel movements of a man who was reportedly constipated since birth. At first, the man is said to look like he was 9 months pregnant because of the enlargement due to his condition. The unidentified 22-year-old had 30 inches of his grossly enlarged bowel removed by surgeons in China. And finally, gorillas mourn the dead.
No. False.
False.
Yeah, they did.
It did, yes. But if it's just they did, no.
No. False. False.
Well, this is true. Turns out it's not only human beings who care for the dead. Researchers who witnessed the deaths of 3 gorillas in Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo found other members of the group gathered around the bodies. In all 3 cases, the gorillas are said to have sat quietly around the bodies and stared at them. In 2 of the cases, the animals who spent most of the time with the deceased were related or in a close relationship. And finally, does music have a therapeutic effect on animals?
Well, meet Alfonso, a singing vet based in southern England who has brought opera to cows. Whether this form of treatment works or not, the jury is still out there.
That's it for this week. You've been watching Fact Finder from the BBC.
Until next time, remember what you read may not be what it seems. Goodbye.
Goodbye.